All my ladies, good rising, Big City 101.3 FM. Who bear with me, darlings. For those that are watching, I apologize. I look so tore up from the floor up, but we're dealing. Nana said you got to do what you got to do. I'm trying to maintain and do what I have to do. I want to thank a very special person in my life who went ahead and did 10 hours at work, then came and took care of me for another 5 hours. I can't tell you how appreciative I am. I went to the doctor yesterday, coming to find out I have an ear infection, which is then causing my sore throat and everything else, high fever. When I tell you last night I took some antibiotics and my whole entire bed is wet. I did not know that sweating it out. Like I always thought, sweat out a cold. I thought that was just old people tell you all types of crazy things. And I never understood what it meant until I woke up and realized there was a body print in my mattress. And it's me. And that's how much I sweat last night. So I'll say I'm at 35% right now, which is a lot better than yesterday's 12. But thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for dealing with what I'm dealing with. I feel like one together we're dealing with this. And I appreciate all of the messages, all of the phone calls, all of the texts, emails. I appreciate you all. As far as weather is concerned, today is going to be a beautiful day. Currently it's 39 degrees. We're looking at rain outside. It was supposed to be snow, but it ended up being rain. High of 51, low of 52. I don't know how that works. High of 51, low of 52. I'm done. I don't even think I should report weather anymore. It's going to rain today, 80% chance of rain throughout the day. Thursday, mañana, high of 56, low of 34. AM clouds, PM sun. Friday, we're looking at partly cloudy and wind, high of 39, low of 20. Saturday, high of 42, low of 31. Sunny throughout the day. And Sunday and Saturday, some more rain, some more wind, high of 57, low of 31. It is what it is. As far as traffic is concerned, baby, all y'all need to get to where you need to be. I don't know what's going on, but that Braintree-Quincy split is at 14 miles an hour. If you're coming from the Cape, you're good to go until you get to that split. They're up to 65 miles an hour. If you're coming from the Braintree area, the Granite Street is down to 34 miles an hour. MA3 South is down to 26. There's no accident that's being reported, nothing. But from that Braintree-Quincy split all the way to you get into Dorchester is 14 miles an hour. Get to where you need to be, baby. As far as our wife is concerned, they're down to 9 miles an hour, which is, we're used to that, right? MA9 West is down to 25 miles an hour. That's that Longwood Avenue. Just get to where you need to be and get there safely. As far as news is concerned, so one of my babies called and she said, Tayla, you don't report local news. You're right, I don't. But I had to report this. Donald Trump gets his first endorsement from a Massachusetts elected official. Now, mind you, in this report, they have a picture of this man. His name is Jeff. I'm going to butcher his name. Dial. Dial. We'll call him Dial for now. And in the picture, he's in the picture with Governor Charlie Baker. And in this picture, he looks so disappointed in this man. I know that this was not on purpose. I know that it wasn't scheduled to be like this, but whoever picked this picture is amazing for it. And Jeff Dial is over here. He's speaking. You can tell he's really engaged in what he's saying. And Governor Charlie Baker is like, this dude. And I think it's a perfect picture for them to put up as he is supporting Donald Trump. And of course, Donald's camp is like, this is very exciting news. We're so excited. Who's next? Listen. I hope nobody's next. I hope that is the one and only. Jeff Dial, that's what we're calling him, a Republican state representative from Whitman, is backing the Republican billionaire presidential candidate, the first Massachusetts House or Senate member to do so publicly. Publicly, mind you. So we'll keep it locked to see who else is going to endorse this idiot. And if you know somebody who lives in Whitman, please make sure they don't vote for him next time Jeff Dial is up for election. That's the only way you can control what's going on, boo. Shout out to Media Blackout USA. The next few posts are going to be in regards to their reports. Media Blackout USA, absolutely amazing. You can find them on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, anywhere. And they have some great news that you won't find anywhere else. CDC, half of the gay Black men are projected to get HIV. Half of gay Black men. So why are they making this projection? According to the CDC, about 43% of Black men who have sex with men will be diagnosed with HIV in their lifetime if the epidemic, don't speak this into our life, CDC, do not. And I want to revisit some of the conversations we've had earlier with Monica Cost. We had a complete series with Monica Cost, Motivational Mondays, if you guys remember. And one of the things she said is really important is our language and our words. And we know how creative our words are. We know how creative language is. Why would you even speak this into our life? Well, Taylor, it's a projection. It's a prediction. They're basing it off no, absolutely not. I don't feel like that. How about you say half of the men aren't going to get HIV if we continue what we're doing as far as educating is concerned, as far as, reaching out to them. And 43% of Black men who have sex with men will be diagnosed. Listen, don't call me talking about gay men or this and gay men or that. I don't do bashing, okay? I promise. We don't bash anybody. 617-282-0062. Good rising, caller, you live.
Good rising, Taylor.
Talk to me, Takwa.
Yes, this is not any bashing, but statistically, right? This is the reason for the effeminization of the Black male. It's the population control move, and what they're stating is not their prediction, but their intention of what they intend to orchestrate. What they do.
So I do remember effeminization. For those who are unfamiliar, effeminization is they went ahead and changed the sex of a fish. This is real. This is not a theory. This isn't, science fiction. They were able to successfully change the sex of a fish by whatever chemicals that they used. And according to conspiracy theorists, because we really don't have any facts, in our food, in our water, in everything that we do, ingest, it is promoting the male effeminization. Now, one of the questions I want to ask Takwa is about, what about white gays? Like, we have to be honest. They exist. White gay men exist. So what about the effeminization of white men?
Well, although this thing was orchestrated by Caucasian people for population control of Black people, as the old adage goes, you throw a boomerang, you hit a duck. Whatever you put in motion for somebody else will backfire on you.
Thank you, Takwa. I love and appreciate you. Thank you. Good rising, good rising.
If you actually Google YouTube, there is African-American scientists who has their research to prove that there are chemicals that they're putting into food that are turning people gay. Matter of fact, the Pentagon wants to invent a gay bomb. So when people say it's not a choice, and the point—
Hold on, I can't act like you didn't just say that. Hold on, the Pentagon wanted to create a gay bomb. What does that mean?
YouTube, basically, with this chemical that they put in food, I guess it's put it in powder form. If a bomb drops or whatever, and the men become contaminated with it, like they became contaminated with the Agent Orange, it will work to their benefit.
Okay, pause. So for those that are currently listening, I am looking, because usually when I Google stuff like this, what comes up is a whole bunch of weird websites that have no credibility. Infowars.com, which is Alex Jones. If you know, Alex Jones is the biggest conspiracy theorist on the planet. Wikipedia even has a gay bomb Wikipedia site. BBC News reported this in 2005. Scientists developed a gay bomb to make enemy soldiers. This is Daily Mail UK. Today found out, these are just the websites that popped up. Globalresearch.com. I'm concerned.
Sister, what I find amazing is in the early 50s, homosexuality was a mental illness. Then it went from mental illness to calling them gay males. Now they're calling them gay men. Terminology has a big effect on people's psychology to make them think it's normal. Here's the weirdest thing. In Europe, 2 countries have made pedophile legal. Google it. I forgot the 2 countries. But next thing you know, in this country, they're going to say, okay, pedophile's fine. Like, you know, our people have this misconception of being kind human beings and allowing evil to exist. I don't care what your religious stance is. If you don't set parameters around your family home, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. We got to cut this political correctness aside and call things out for what they are. I mean, crackheads like crack. I mean, I'm going to say, oh, crack should be okay because people like to smoke it. Just because people like to do something evil, we don't have to. You can love the person in spite of their sin, but don't tell me that sin is normal. And I'm not religious. I'm saying, forget the word sin, an abomination in our race. And the reason why you say this, right, homosexuals, that's because we do it for pleasure. When it was done to us, it was mind manipulation. We never had homosexuals until we came to this plantation. You go to Africa right now, and the only gay Africans you see are the ones who were raised in Europe. That's not a coincidence. If there was no white people, there would never be no black homosexuals.
That is a huge statement that you just made.
With,
he said it's a fact.
Bourgeois Negro from the NAACP, Urban League, or Harvard that try to put all this crap into our people's minds. It's okay. You know why those people like it? They hung around these white folks too long. All these Negroes I know from these organizations, if you look into their lifestyle, look who their friends are, look where they grew up, and Martha's Vineyard, places where homosexuality used to have big orgies and whatnot. That's a known fact. The Martha's Vineyard, bourgeois Negroes that used to hang there, I'm not saying all, but there were small groups of them that used to have orgy parties. I've heard research from people actually went there, and we told them, man, if you touch me, I'll kill you.
Wow. Well, for those who don't know, this is Mr. Nubian. He is 100% pro-black, and he probably pissed you off, and I really don't care, because if I'm allowed to have an opinion, so is he.
Ever since that bro came with that song, they've been harassing him, and that bro got 3 more years before he gets out.
Who?
Buju Banton, remember that song?
Oh, yeah.
He went after him and threw him in jail on a trumped-up drug charge. But yet now they got these gay rappers, you know, they ain't throwing them in jail.
Yeah. Thank you. Love and appreciate you. Let me get back to this report. According to the CDC, about 43% of Black men who have sex with men will be diagnosed with HIV in their lifetimes if, again, let's go back to the wording. He's absolutely right. This wording means so much. It's so important when we pay attention to these reports and see what they're really trying to say. This was presented on Tuesday by the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC. For Hispanic men who have sex with men, the rate is 22%. For white men, it's about 10%. The latest report is staggering. It's a reminder that gay men of color bear the brunt of the HIV crisis. The fact has been evident for years in the data on HIV, but it has often gone unmentioned as public health campaigns focus on broad-based prevention strategies. You see this community that is at far risk for HIV infection, but there's almost seems to be no concern or no effort at all to talk about it. And this came from Greg Millett, the Vice President and Director of Public Policy at AMFAR. We got Miss G on the line. Hey, Miss G, what's going on, baby?
I'm kind of baffled by that statement because
talk to me, baby.
What about the drug IV users where they said that their blood gets infected with HIV, and a majority of them are white? So I'm just wondering to myself, why is it based on black?
Miss G, I don't know if you listened to the previous caller, but the comment that he made was that the reason why the numbers are what they are is because this is not what they're projecting. This is what they are in the works of completing. When our work is done, this is what's going to take place.
It's a good thing that a lot of people don't believe their study. I think it's a study, basically.
Well, if you listen to the wording, Miss G, you know, the if, and the if is a big if. There is no if. Why aren't we focusing on the numbers and the rates that have declined? Why are we saying, listen, this is the number, this is what it's going to be if this persists. This is the number that we will obtain. And that when I'm looking at this bar graph, and it's blowing me for a loop because Black women don't even hit 3%. Not even 3%. As far as women and men who inject drugs, for the men and women combined, it's not even 9%.
That majority right there, and I wonder why they're not, making the statement broader. Why aren't they covering that area also with the Black homosexuals? So why are they basing it just on Black? Why aren't they talking the other races and what's going on there?
Miss G, you already know the answer to that question, boo. You know the answer, Sway, because Black men are at 43% and Hispanic men are at 22%, and white men don't even reach 10%. You know the answer.
Okay. Well, I don't believe in statistics anyway, so I'm just not a believer of statistics. But I'll just go along with the whole, the whole lie. I think it's a lie.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, Miss G, I love and appreciate you. I hope you have an awesome day today. All right. In other news, this is a really big one for me. I used to work for this company, Johnson & Johnson, to pay $72 million. $72 million for talcum powder ovarian cancer death. Let me just say, let's be transparent this rising. How many of you ladies take a little baby powder and put it down your pants? The front, the back, all in your chest area, underneath your arms, all of us, any of us. Johnson & Johnson ordered to pay $72 million. They didn't even accept claim. They didn't even say, let me go ahead and shell this out. They were ordered to pay $72 million for ovarian cancer death caused by talcum powder. The lawsuit against the health products company was filed by the family of Jacqueline Fox, an Alabama woman who died of ovarian cancer caused by exposure to Johnson & Johnson's signature baby powder and shower-to-shower products for decades. The suit alleges that the company not only knew the risk posed by their products, but it actively covered up studies that suggested a link between ovarian cancer and their baby powder. Are you listening to me? Are you listening to what I am saying? The words that are coming out of my mouth. If for 5 seconds this suit has any credibility, well, the company was ordered to pay $72 million. I'm wondering how many other people just did not know, how many other people died but were completely unaware that this risk existed. Just think about it. That's not a conspiracy theorist. That's a realist. Just think about that. How many people could have contracted cancer and didn't even know? Been using Johnson & Johnson products ever since they were a baby. For crying out loud, I'm one of them. I read this story, I'm like, not anymore. And the fact that this suit alleges that the company not only knew the risk, but actively covered up the studies that suggested, didn't point fingers, but just suggested the link. I hope y'all listening. In other news, as far as Flint, Michigan is concerned, I don't know how this is real. Residents to receive $30 million to help pay their water. Listen, why are we helping to pay anything? You remember the story that I read yesterday, the man who prided himself on drinking clean water, the man who prided himself on, taking care of himself, and he didn't think that he was at risk. His blood level was 5 times the over the limit level. Why are we helping people pay for their water? We shouldn't be helping anybody. The water should be free. I'm going to make you pay for this poison? You're crazy. Absolutely insane. And guess who signed the bill? Guess who signed it? The governor, Rick Snyder. Oh my gosh, that snake. Why does he still have a job? According to the report, the approved funding would help provide residents with credits to cover their water bills from April 2014. April 2014. Remember the report that we read a few months ago that said that they knew about this since April 2014. That's when they went ahead and in the government buildings provided employees with fresh bottled drinking water. You guys remember that? From April 2014 through April 2016. Pause, because the water crisis isn't fixed. Pause, because the water coming out the faucet isn't clean and without lead. Why is there a gap? Because April 2016 is not, that's 2 months. Are they projecting that the issue is going to be fixed by then? It is what it is. $70 million. Do you think that's enough to cover it? We'll see. And we're definitely going to stay on top of the story again. I want to give a huge shout out to Media Blackout USA. Please head over mediablackout.usa.com. Great news, stories that you'll read before they hit anywhere else. Thousands want the University of Alabama to rename building for Harper Lee instead of a KKK leader. And I don't know if you guys remember the conversation that we had with James Lowen, but when he talked about lies across America and how so many buildings, so many streets, we don't even know are ex-Confederate leaders, ex-KKK leaders. And we're just like, oh, let's go to the KKK building, like over yonder. You guys remember the story? A junior at the University of Alabama has launched a petition asking that a building on campus be renamed to honor Harper Lee, the late author, rather than the former senator who was also the leader of the KKK. The petition launched 4 days ago upon Lee's quiet passing and has already garnished 2,328 signatures as of yesterday rising. It calls on the university president to erase a prominent relic of the university's racist past. A white student, Jessica Hunger, started the petition. She makes the case for renaming the building that houses the English department. The university has an amazing chance to show our support for racial equality, as well as to honor the legacy generally of a woman who promoted kindness, empathy for all. Harper Lee was doubtless the university's greatest contribution to literature and would be more than fitting for our English building to bear the name, which reflects so much accurately than the values of the white supremacist Tyler Morgan. You can agree, you can disagree, but 2,003 signatures in 2 days, 3 days is amazing. She thought that she would get some backlash, she told reports, but people started signing way more quicker than she could have ever imagined. We have a caller on the line, 617-282-0062. Good rise and caller, you're live.
Yes, that's also right here in our backyard and front yard. If you pick up a book called The Hidden History of Massachusetts, done by
We can't hear you. Come back to the phone. Come back to the phone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, so there's a book called The Hidden History of Massachusetts, published by the Nation of Islam Research Team, that goes to the neighborhoods and gives you the names of these streets and tells you some of the wicked slave owners and slaveholders that they were named after. Governor Dudley, for one, this is why New Dudley Street was renamed Malcolm X Boulevard, but there are a whole lot of other streets that need to be renamed in our city.
Yeah, absolutely right. Boston.com actually covered this. I pulled up an article really quickly, and I'll go ahead and post it on the Wake Up with Taylor Andre page. And it's The Hidden History of Massachusetts, correct? Okay. I'll go ahead and post that for those that are currently driving. Do not pick up your phone. Do not text and drive. Don't try and search for it. I will post it online, and just when you get to work, you can look at it.
DC listeners, there's also The Hidden History of DC.
Okay, so why don't we just come out with a book with a hidden history of the United States?
I guess we got to take it state by state because it's so much material.
I got you, Takwa. Thank you, baby.
You're welcome.
You know what? It's that time, power hour time. Ask me how excited I am, and I will tell you today is the day that the Lord had made. I am rejoiced and glad in it. I want to give a huge shout out to the bus driver who recognized a young teen that went missing in Detroit, and her family went desperately searching to find her. She was 13 years old, wandering the streets, and he recognized her and was just like, "Hey, baby, how you doing? You were on TV the other day." He made a stop, and when she walked onto his bus, he immediately knew who she was and called it in and returned her safely to her parents. You don't have to have a title to do a good deed. That's the moral of my story right now. You don't have to have a title to do a good deed. And I just want you guys to be mindful that every single last one of us every day can make a difference. And I know it's so overwhelming when we read these stories and we take a look at what's going on in the world around us. It's very overwhelming. It is. But it does not take a title for you to do a good deed. So please today, take a moment, do a good deed. What are they? Acts of kindness, random acts of kindness. It doesn't take much. Lord have mercy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have an amazing guest. We have Boston's own Black History in the building. Boston's own Black History.
Go over your head like a snapback. Over your take over top that. And your flow so old, granddad. It's just bad time. I'm way too much like a black cap. Why you stop chatting in the club for? Just dance man. Like yo fam, yo fam. Ain't no girl better than. I'm on the road, caravan. Let me take this fast, Ramadan. Cause it's going down, avalanche. I'ma keep it short, paragraph. Queen Nisha, my rain, and a rock. Take you off Israel, Nazareth. Oh Jesus, oh Lord, oh Jesus. A couple of snaky friends, just Adam and Eve knows. There's no debate on who's better. Come on. I'll turn them out to a girl like Bruce Jenner. Shout out the dance like. We break down the dance like. I be the one they love, I be the dog. They know where I'm from. Oh, 1 to 2 1. Yo, brethren, where is your hairline gone? I can't believe it. I can't believe it, cheek. Some girls wake up and don't even brush their teeth. What's it that thing? That's a bad breath take. How could you talk my name when you ain't even brush your teeth? Brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Brush your teeth, never brush your teeth. Brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Bars cold like a TikTok. You got a pop belly like Rick Ross. Stiff gal do the TikTok. Big mouth gal, where your lips gone? I ain't got time to be TikTok. But I got a new wristwatch. Let's go toe to toe, flip flops. I make the crowd jump like crisscross. I got a dark skin friend that looks like Rachel Dolezal. And I got a light skin friend that looks like Rachel Dolezal. Which one's which? Not sure. Then gonna cut encore. Don't think you're buff cause you're wearing contour. Cause I'll wipe your brows off. I'll snap you with your nails off. I go blind and hands out. I'm at the nail shop. Look,
These girls are for him.
they really ain't on none. You can't do that on me.
Are you gonna go and get your cousin?
Everything ain't rosy, I beg you not. I'm on the tea for and set it off. Then I bounce like a belly flop. Got one eye on your man. Set you up, yeah, well, I'm getting what? Watch me like Netflix. You go to the club, when you wake up though for your gas and electric. Hey, I can't believe it. I can't believe it, cheek. Some man wake up and don't even brush their teeth. How could you do that? How could you even speak? How could you talk my name when you ain't even brush your teeth? Brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Brush your teeth, never brush your teeth. Brush your teeth. Brush your teeth. Brush your teeth. Brush brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Queen speech for ya. Side for the way. Bang, 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 bang. Bang, 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 bang. Woo!
Yep, that's right, baby. You know what it is? It's DJ Sus One, the feature presentation. Listen, make sure you wake up with Tayla Andre Monday through Friday, 5 to 7 a.m. on Big City 101.3 FM. Wake up with the Radio Rebel. Politics, news, conspiracies. Wake up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. This is the type of stuff I'm into, all right? Make sure you tune in. Let's go.
Let's go, let's go, let's go. Good rising once again, Big City 101.3 FM. Waking up with Tayla Andre Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 7. As far as Power Hour is concerned, I am so honored to be in the building this rising. Retired broadcast journalist Jim Boyd. Jim Boyd. If you are over the age of 25, you woke up with Jim Boyd telling you the weather, telling you what school was going to be. You know what? You were waiting for him to tell you that there was no school. That's what you were waiting for. Because that's what I remember. In all honesty, Jim, let me be 100% transparent. I remember sitting in front of my grandmother's stove with the oven on and the door open, getting my hair pressed and curled, watching you. Like, that's such a vivid memory that I have.
Memory.
It is. And aside from that, I have to tell you how extremely nervous I am. 37 years of broadcast journalism. I feel like I'm being critiqued.
What's to be nervous about?
Everything. Come a little closer. 37 years of his television news career with Boston's WCVB TV, Channel 5. I am so honored. 37 years.
And I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Anytime. You are Black history, Boston's own Black history. Why wouldn't we want you here?
I've been in Boston for quite a while. Seen quite a bit.
And no one's honored you yet. You've been honored. I've seen your Wikipedia page.
Every day is an honor. Every day I get up and look in the mirror and see somebody smiling back. It's an honor.
Blessings, peace. So I have to say, my first question is, you received your degree, your bachelor's degree.
Finally.
At what age?
Let's see, that was 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been 71.
71 years old. So do you hear my voice for all those that are like, oh, I'm 40 something, I'm 50, I'm 62, I can't go back to school?
No. I mean, there isn't an age limit on when you can fulfill a dream. There's no age limit on that. And if you dream and dream big and believe in yourself, you can accomplish anything you want.
Mm-hmm. So you went to school initially for psychology.
When I went to school, way back when, back in the dark ages, back in 1958 when I graduated from high school, I entered Long Island University as an undeclared major, and then I probably shifted majors 3 or 4 times before they finally threw me out. As I like to say, I got a letter from the camp people one day. They said, "You can't come back. Considering your academic record, you just, I was on academic probation from the first semester that I entered Long Island University. Really? And
was there any specific reason? Because we spoke with Jane Elliott yesterday, and she said 3 out of 5 males are dyslexic, and that's the reason why they don't excel in school. Was there a specific reason why from semester 1 you just...
Dyslexia?
Yes.
I don't think I heard of the word dyslexia until I was about 45. I'm not even sure that people were being evaluated when I was in school. Either you were slow and put in the slow class, or you were considered either normal or perhaps even an accelerated student. And for the time that I was probably in 4th or 5th grade, I was determined to be an accelerated student, and went into special programs in elementary school, and went to a junior high school where I accomplished 3 years of junior high school in 2 years of study.
Oh, wow.
And then went into high school, at the age of 13. Junior high school was 7th, 8th, and 9th, and I did that in 2 years. And then I went into the 10th grade in high school, and I was 13 years old. I graduated when I was 16. And if there's a reason that I can point to, is that I probably just did not have, certainly either the mental maturity or the physical maturity, to be in college. And I just basically struggled. And as far as I'm concerned, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That wasn't where your dream was taking you at that time.
Not at that time.
Not at that time.
Not at that time.
Lord have mercy. So 37 years. Let's start at the beginning. First, you did radio not radio. First, you did broadcast in New York.
I'm originally from New York.
Mm-hmm.
Born and raised in Harlem.
Ah.
New York, so nice they had to name it twice. And I started work for what is the precursor now to PBS, National Educational Television. I started working in the mailroom back in 1961.
Move it on up.
And so if you want me to go through the whole history, I'll just try and condense it. So I worked in the mailroom, then worked in the public relations department. I did a little bit of writing for the public relations department, and eventually worked my way into production of sort of a news and background program, a show called The News in Perspective, done jointly between National Educational Television and the New York Times. And eventually worked my way from production assistant to producer. Had some fabulous times, working on that show, and some experiences that I remember very, very fondly and very vividly. I think that we'll find that professionally, it is not only what you know, but who you know that helps to determine where you go and what you do. One of the people that I worked with back in National Educational Television in New York was one of the original founders of WCVB-TV. And when they were trying to assemble a staff for CVB back in the early 70s, back in 1970, early 1971, a man by the name of Larry Picard asked me if I would be interested in joining his news team because he was going to be the news director. I had some experience with Boston. I spent the better part of a year in 1967 and 68 at Channel 2, WGBH. I think I can take credit for putting the first 4 or 5 episodes of a show at that point called Say Brother on the air. It sort of evolved into what is now Basic Black. And I was a producer. I appeared on the program a couple of times, back in, I think it was early 1968. And what was interesting is that program went on the air right after the assassination of Martin Luther King.
Wow.
April 1968, if I have my dates correct. Boston, as just about every other city in the United States, was in upheaval. Blacks felt that this was, Martin Luther King was one of our saviors at that point. Was helping to make progress, helping to bring about at least an understanding that we were demanding equality. And when he was assassinated, things just went crazy. Excuse me. There were riots in the streets in just about every major city in the United States, and Boston, no exception. Some of the things that I recall, and I mean, this is, we're going back generations now, that Say Brother was one of the responses to not hearing the voices of Black people in the Boston community. And so Channel 2, as did pretty much every other Boston television and radio station that didn't have any Black entries, decided that, Channel 2 would do what it could, to provide a voice for the up until that point voiceless. And Say Brother was the program that we came up with. It was an hour-long program at the time, and we had news segments and entertainment segments, but by and large, it was we hear you. The city of Boston, WGBH, the WGBH Educational Foundation said, we hear you. And we think that you need a voice. And we'll hope to
We
provide
have a
it.
request for you to come closer to the mic.
Closer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or bring the mic closer to you.
Okay.
So during this time, can we stay here for a moment?
We certainly may.
Okay. During this time, you were a producer for this show.
I was a producer of the show.
Did you have any part in bringing out or speaking on what is the name of that documentary? James Brown Saves Boston. Do you remember that when James Brown came to Boston during the riots?
Yes.
Did you cover any of that? Do you remember that time?
It's interesting because it's an issue that came up recently, and asking whether or not, and I don't have a recollection of exactly how James Brown's performance at Boston Garden came about. I do know that he was in town and decided that he would do a concert and invite the Black community in Boston to come to the concert as a way of giving him an opportunity to speak to the issues that were going on, the violence that was happening around the cities, and how he, as well as most thinking people, felt that it was going to be non-productive, to tear apart our own city and our own homes and our own neighborhoods, because of the outrage and the anger that we felt. But exactly how that came about, I am not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even remember exactly where it was aired, but I do recall that James Brown was in town and very quickly agreed not only to do the performance, but to talk to the Boston audience and say, this is what I feel about this. I understand the outrage. I understand the anger. I understand the frustrations that we feel, but rioting and tearing the city apart, tearing the nation apart, is not going to bring about the solution that we're looking for.
Do you remember during this time, because a few years later, we decided that we were going to bus our children. Do you remember that?
We decided we were going to bus our
didn't
children.
decide that.
The federal courts decided that was going to be the remedy to an age-long age discrimination and injustice, to basically the Black and other minority residents of the city of Boston. I recall that very vividly.
Can you walk us through that?
A group of, and forgive me because I don't recall the names of all the people that were involved, but a group of strong leaders, intelligent people who felt the great injustice that was coming down on the children and citizens of Boston in the way of an education system, that basically said, nope, you don't count, and filed various lawsuits. One, there was a thing called the racial balance law or racial imbalance law that went through the state of Massachusetts and was passed in the state, saying that you have to balance your schools racially. You cannot provide something for one race of people, by and large whites and the Caucasian race, and not provide the same. I mean, we're public institutions. The schools are public institutions. So basically, the racial imbalance law was on the books. It was a state law, and Boston, at that time, the Boston city leaders and the Boston School Committee in particular just thumbed its nose at the state, thumbed its nose at the law, and refused to implement it. And so what we had were schools that were basically unequal. It was separate schools, unequal schools. I went into several of the school buildings that were in Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan, and they were crumbling. They were part of the Boston school system. Teaching materials were not the ones that were necessary, just weren't there. And you visit schools in other parts of Boston, in downtown Boston, in South Boston, Charlestown. It admittedly, perhaps not the same as you'd find in the suburbs of Boston, but certainly the schools were better equipped. More seasoned teachers were, in the schools. Administrators and families were much more involved in getting the thing. The schools were much more connected. Connected to the politicians in the city of Boston, connected to the politicians in the neighborhoods, and connected to the people that had the power. And again, I can remember visiting so many schools in our neighborhood, if you will, that simply were inferior to the schools. The schools were separate. They were schools that were superior in equipment and everything that was being provided by the same tax dollars, that were coming out of the paychecks of blacks and whites and Latinos in Greater Boston. Yet it seemed as though there was an incredible imbalance in terms of where the money was going and how the citizens were being served. Thus, let's bring about what we can do legally and put on the books. Laws that say we are as entitled to education as anyone else. And the school committee in Boston said, basically, we are not going to do that. So what did happen was the federal courts, stepped in when lawsuits were filed. Judge W. Arthur Garrity was sitting on the federal court at that time and was handling the case. And after years and years and years, finally decided, okay, this is the remedy that what we think is going to work best. And that was what was called forced busing. And then children from Roxbury and Mattapan and Dorchester were put on buses and sent to schools in other parts of Boston, South Boston and Charlestown. And it was, having been a reporter covering that situation, it was one of the ugliest situations that I've ever seen in my life.
Why?
Well, why? It was because people were resistant to the changes that were being ordered by the federal government. So all of a sudden, the big evil federal government was coming in and forcing down the throats of people in Boston where their children should go to school and who should be in the schools in which neighborhoods. And it was ugly because what we saw on a daily basis were school children, and in some cases kindergarten students, getting off of a bus in a neighborhood that was not where they lived and having mainly adults yelling and screaming, and in some cases doing even worse things, like throwing things at them and trying to assault the children. And so we got to a point where state police were forming caravans that would guide these buses, would escort these buses from where the children were being picked up in their neighborhoods in Roxbury and going through the city of Boston and ending up right on the front steps of a school in South Boston and forming a cordon of police officers so that the kids could walk safely from the bus into the schools. And the same situation would have to occur when the schools let out, that the police had to be there to escort the kids back onto the buses and escort the buses out of the communities. And sometimes it would be blocks and blocks and blocks of outraged parents or outraged community people throwing stuff at the buses.
These people didn't have jobs? I'm thinking, when kids get out of school, I'm at work.
It is, you have to talk to people who were on the other side of that coin, to get an explanation why this was the reaction. But from an observer standpoint, it was just so much outrage at the fact that the federal judge was, quote, forcing down the throats of people in Boston this desegregation plan. It was busing to achieve desegregation in the city of Boston. And I mean, that's what it was, I guess, officially called. And again, it adopted the nickname of forced busing, and that's pretty much what stuck. First day of school, I was assigned to cover Hyde Park High School. And arrived at the school, and there painted on the front steps of Hyde Park High School in probably 4-foot high letters, N-word, go home. And that pretty much was the tone that we do not want, we the people who live in these communities where blacks are being bussed into, don't want this. We don't want these people coming to our community. And it was very, very difficult to cover that situation without being very emotional about it and feeling, well, wait a minute, they're telling me that if these were my children, I didn't live in Boston, and other than a short while back in 1967, 1968, when I was working at WGBH, I never lived in Boston. But it was telling me that if I lived in the city, that they didn't want my kids coming to schools in communities that previously had not had people bussed into.
I couldn't imagine. Okay, so here I can give my opinion all day, everything.
Yeah.
In your job, you were unable to give your opinion. You had to just give facts. How were you able to separate when you walked on the first day of school, Hyde Park High, N-word, go home in 4-foot size letters?
Yeah.
How do you detach yourself from that emotion and just give facts?
Well, that's an impossibility. I mean, it's purely impossible for me to detach myself from the emotion. But I can't go on the air angry. I can't go on the air, saying that this is how I'm affected by this. So I try to separate that emotion because I'm obviously going to feel that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously going to feel very offended and very hurt, threatened, and perhaps even frightened by the fact that this emotion has welled up to such a point where this is how it's being expressed. And frankly, taking some paint and spray painting some words, on the sidewalk in front of a school is nothing in comparison to what was happening to, people were being, I don't remember exactly the name of the individual, but if I'm not mistaken, it was a Haitian man who was driving a car through a section of South Boston, and he was chased out of his car. And if it were not for the sound-thinking people and good-hearted people in one community opening the door, to this man, he probably would have been severely beaten. Ted Landsmark is walking across City Hall Plaza, and there is a phenomenal Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph taken by a man who was a colleague of mine, Stanley Foreman, of someone spearing this man with an American flag right in front of City Hall Plaza. And those were the kinds of emotions. I was covering a demonstration at the State House. Students had walked out of schools in Charlestown and South Boston and come up to the State House to let their legislators know that they, as young people, they were in total disagreement with the busing order. And at one point, black man and woman across the street from the State House were walking through the Boston Common. And for some reason, these two people, couldn't peacefully walk through, when all of a sudden folks broke away from the State House steps and started chasing these two people through the Boston Common. And what I recall very vividly is that a man who was at the time I believe, state representative, and another man who was a state senator. One was Ray Flynn, and the other was Joe Timilty, set out to make sure that no harm came to these people. But you saw this, and I have to call them a mob of people chasing these two citizens who were walking through the Boston Common and were not for the efforts of, Ray Flynn and Joe Tility, who ran down and said, wait a minute, you have the right to come up to the State House and express your disagreement with things that are going on in the city you don't like, but you're not going to be right out here in front of our eyes assaulting these people. And so they stopped that particular assault from occurring on that particular day. But there were reports, throughout the city. And again, we're talking back in 1974, 1975. And so my recollection of specific events and specific details obviously is not going to be as sharp as it was 2 or 3 days later when I was reporting those kinds of things. But it was an ugly, ugly, ugly period. And I'll share with you one other instance where prior to the start of school, and I believe this was in 1974, there were marches and rallies and people would, so there was one Sunday afternoon, there was a march scheduled from Franklin Park to Carson Beach. And it was mostly, although not exclusively, people of color, Blacks, Latinos, people that lived in the city, lived in the Dorchester and Mattapan and Roxbury neighborhoods that were marching to say, this is our city too. And they were taking the march to Carson Beach because there were people in South Boston who were saying, yes, it's our city and this is our territory, and we basically can't stand this program, this new desegregation program is going to be put into place. And if my memory serves me correctly, this happened the weekend or a weekend prior to the opening of school for the first day that would open under this desegregation program. And so there was a massive rally of people marching onto Carson Beach. And there was a massive presence of people on Carson Beach who were saying, no, you're not going to come marching through the streets here. The police decided that we don't want these two groups to get together, to ever meet. So the police set up kind of like a DMZ or a no man's land in between the group that was marching from Franklin Park and separating, maybe by about 100 yards or so, the people that were standing there saying, no, we are going to protest against this march. And at some point, people started throwing stuff. The DMZ, that demarcation separation area, is where the police decided that the press should be. And so as a member of the Fourth Estate, I was in this zone, in between the protesters and the anti-protesters. And then things started being thrown. And at one point, I looked up and I saw a rock that apparently had my name on it, headed straight for my head. And had I not ducked and maneuvered and gotten out of the way, I probably would have been hit by a baseball-sized brick or a rock or something. And that's exactly what went on in so many different instances. But that is one that I was an eyewitness to and almost a victim of. I don't recall how many arrests were made that day or how many interviews there were. But it was, again, a very, very ugly situation. It was an ugly time. One of my most vivid memories is that, since I was working at Channel 5, and Channel 5 is located in Needham, we generally would use the Massachusetts Turnpike to get to and from, is that what you would see is prior to school letting out, in the afternoon would be a caravan of maybe as many as 40 or 50 state police vehicles driving down the Mass Pike going into Boston. And that was for their escort duty, to escort the buses away from these schools and back to the communities that people lived in. And then 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, after school had let out, you see these state police cruisers in caravan pulling out of Boston. And this happened on a daily basis. I mean, I just shudder to think of all of the money that was being spent, not only in terms of how much it costs to gas these buses and to provide drivers for the buses, but the federal government felt that this was the solution, was the only viable solution that it could think of that was going to help to balance, the schools racially in the city of Boston. And there were just so very many victims. I mean, think about how the year before, say you were a student who was an athlete, a junior, and you were thinking about maybe you're going to get a scholarship to college if you did well in your senior year. And in your senior year, you didn't go back to the same school, because of busing to achieve desegregation, you were assigned to go to a different school. And when you got to that different school, there were people there that perhaps were unreceptive of you. I mean, so many different things happened around that desegregation of schools. Probably there are people who have a better memory and a better sense of the statistics, but Boston's school system had about 100,000 students in it prior to, shall we call it, forced busing. If I am not mistaken, within a few years, there were only probably half that many students because people just left the schools in droves. People moved out of the city. They moved into suburbs in and around Boston, moved out of the city school system and went to Catholic schools, private schools. It was a game changer. And so much happened in the city of Boston in and around. And again, we're talking historically now. We're talking about things that happened back in the 1970s. But how many lives were disrupted? And you can look to the causes of that. The causes, some say it was because the school system and the politicians in Boston just refused to provide what they're supposed to provide for every citizen, an opportunity to get a decent education. And we're going to do it in a separate but unequal way. And the solution to it was, as far as the federal government was concerned, we're going to have this busing program in Boston, and we're going to take kids, and so that we're going to mix them up so that there's no way that you can say that one school is not equal to another. And perhaps it was well intended, but the consequences were, I think, obviously not what was intended.
So my mind is over here wondering a whole bunch of things, Jim. But first of all, I'm thinking about the current 25% decrease that we have 40 years later. You said 100,000 students. We currently have, 65,000 students.
Yep.
And you made a comment about how the schools will be equal, no matter what
Yep.
school you shop. But now, Boston, 2016, the schools are 100% failing across the city, or at least a lot of parents feel that way as far as BPS is concerned. I want to fast forward a little bit, but stay on education. What have you seen, or what do you feel? Because I know throughout the years, 37 years, there wasn't a lot of feeling that you could, tell the listeners. I would like the listeners to know your feelings on what you've seen throughout the years when it's come to education in Boston.
Well, certainly things are better. I would tend to think that certain things are better. There's much more equality in terms of having access to the education that is provided in the city of Boston. What are some of the reasons that people come to Boston from other parts of the country, other parts of the world? Because of the phenomenal educational institutions of higher learning that exist in the Boston area. Boston University, Boston College, MIT, Harvard, some of the finest institutions in the world are here. Yet the city school system pales in comparison to the school systems in communities. And I hope I'm not offending anyone, because I know a lot of very, very hardworking administrators and teachers and parents that are doing all that they can, to try and make sure that a top-notch education is provided for people who live in the city of Boston, in the schools in the city of Boston. And I personally have spent a lot of time in schools in the city of Boston. But the education that's provided by the Boston School Department leaves something to be desired. It certainly could be better. Perhaps it could be better if there were greater partnerships with those other institutions of higher learning that I just talked about. But clearly, many, many schools have been built in the city of Boston for the students in the city of Boston. If I'm not mistaken, and again, I have to defer to someone else who has a better grasp of the statistics, that more students are coming back to the schools and more kids are getting better educations than they were certainly back in the 1970s. But I still think that there's so much more room for improvement. And I'll just talk a little bit about, give a shout out to a very good friend of mine, Ruth Davis, who is a retired teacher. She was at the Dennis Haley School in Roslindale. And I believe Dennis Haley is in Roslindale. And I know she moved to the Sumner School, which I am pretty confident is in Roslindale. Maybe Dennis Haley is somewhere else. It's right along American Legion Highway, or at least it was when I visited. But probably 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago, he wrote me a letter at Channel 5 and said, would you come and talk to some of my students? And Ruth retired probably in 2013, maybe 2014. But from the time that I got that initial letter, and I think it was in like 1978 or so, I visited her school at least once a year and talked to her students. When I would get an invitation to speak to students at a school, I would do it. If it was feasible within my schedule. And I didn't discriminate. My preference was to talk to kids in the city, because I'm like a product of inner city schools myself. I went to New York City school system. But if I got a call from one of the suburban schools to go and talk to students, talk to Metco students in a school outside the city of Boston, and talk to the general population in schools that were predominantly white outside the city of Boston, I would go. And I think that it was important that whatever status I carried with me was seen and recognized and understood to be the norm for kids in the city of Boston and for kids outside the city of Boston. So if you think that there is a profile or a high profile to someone who is a news anchor, a news reporter in a major market city such as Boston, and this person happens to be a person of color, that should be considered the norm as opposed to the exception. And it was the exception. I mean, I was the exception. There were very, very few reporters of color when I started at WCBB. People on the anchor desk, even fewer people of color on the anchor desk in and around television stations in Boston when I started. And I think it's important that if you hold a position like that, that you expose as many people to the fact that you are just another individual, another person who gets up in the morning and puts your feet on the floor 1 foot at a time and goes about your daily life. And you can accomplish those things, no matter what your color. But particularly in a situation such as Boston, which is still very unusual, when you look at, say, the power brokers in the city and who they are and what they look like. you go to other cities and you just don't see the same kind of ratios. You don't see the same lack of people of color in positions of power, positions of authority.
You set the norm. We do have a call on the line. If you have any questions for Jim Boyd, please, they hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. I got your questions, baby. I do have your questions. Thank you for your patience. Good rising, calling you live.
How you doing, brother? And sister, I'm all, I drive for the key, so I gotta get in the bus real soon. But you talk about segregation. I was there. I did the busing over Savage Hill from Grove Hall to John L. Marley, which is a nursing home or apartment building now. I remember when they used to throw rocks and batteries at us going over the bridge, and they didn't want us there, and was escorted by the state police, different bathrooms and all that. And actually, Boston came a long, long ways, and a lot of people, the young kids, they don't see that. I'm 50 years old, I grew up in Grove Hall, and a lot of kids don't see that. We had it tough back then. The kids got it easy now. They can get in college with a B and a C. Back then, we couldn't. So the only thing I'm voicing is, Boston came a long way, and it was rough back then. I remember the first family that moved over to South Boston on the first floor in D Street. So, Boston was very segregated, but we still live in that time that, it's still there, but it's hidden. It's hidden. Education and knowledge they can never ever take from you. And guys gotta have pride and dignity. Your first impression is the most important. You gotta get up in the morning and grind. When your kids get up and see you go out to work and grind, that's it. Not sit back and lay on the couch and play Nintendo and do whatever else. I'm not gonna say that over the radio. It starts at home with you dads. And I'm calling out you dads. You be with a woman, and then when she has a baby, she can't do the same things, you leave. You don't grind it out.
So you're trying to cover a whole nother topic right now. It's perfectly okay. I understand. I understand the strong black man in here bringing out that oomph in you. I got you. But I understand that we're bringing it back for a lot of people that are from Boston that were during that time. And thank you for bringing, again, I told you, living Boston history right now.
Those are the memories. Those are the things that happened. Those are the things that I observed, and those are the things that I lived through. And this caller, lived through on a daily basis things that I would, sort of come in from, my suburban, lookout post out in Needham, observe for a while, go back and put it on television and tell people what I saw, and then retreat to wherever my living room was, which was probably a little bit quieter. And here's a man who was a young man at that time who was living that situation and understanding exactly just how difficult it was to be a Bostonian, to be a black Bostonian at that time. Mm-hmm. My hat's off to him, and I can certainly appreciate and understand the message that he's trying to get out there. That we struggled, we adults, we of previous generations struggled so that our kids can have a better life. My hope is that so that every kid can have a better life, so that we didn't go through all of these struggles and all of this heartbreak and all of these sacrifices so that kids could just flitter it away. My one regret is that I see some of the same situations occurring now that occurred when I was a youngster, in terms of how people are being discriminated against and how people are being abused and how people are being taken advantage of. Earlier you were talking about the situation in Flint, Michigan. That is an absolute atrocity. Mm-hmm. If nobody goes to jail over that, I would say that's exactly what goes on here. It's business as usual. To decide that, okay, the water resources that people have in their homes, because we're going to save a few pennies, let's go and get this contaminated water out of the Detroit River and put it into people's homes, and to
charge them for
and
it.
to add insult to injury to make them pay for it, to make them pay for contaminated water that could damage their kids in years to come with the mercury in the water and causing brain damage and whatnot. You would have thought that that was the sort of situation that could exist back in the 1920s or 30s or 40s or 50s, but would not be allowed, in this century, in the 21st century. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, talk about something that, and of course, when you look at Flint, Michigan, what is it? It is a community of people of color, the majority people of color, that are being discriminated against in this particular way.
Mm.
It's not bringing drugs into the community, it's bringing contaminated water into their community and ruining the minds and the health of
And killed 10
I've said
people.
enough.
10 people have died.
I've said enough about that. I'm getting
You're getting emotional.
right. I no longer have to be the objective reporter. I'm emotional about that, and every time I hear about that, I just get incensed.
Mm. Well, we have a few more questions, callers calling in, and we have a slew of questions coming in from Facebook, Instagram, and private messages. If we don't get to all of your questions, please head over to YouTube because, Jim, if you don't mind, can we do a little YouTube conversation if we don't get all these questions in? All right, so after the show is done and over, I definitely will take some more questions off air on YouTube, but Good Rising Caller, you're live.
Hello?
It's you, baby. Good Rising.
Yes, good morning, Good Rising. First of all, I want to say I've been listening to you every day, just about, and I want to say congratulations to your guest that you have on the show. I remember as a kid when he was one of the first black people on television, and like the first caller said earlier on, the young kids today are not being appreciative of from where they were for what happened back then, because I'm a lot older than that previous caller. And that lady that was in charge of the school system, her name was Louise Day Hicks. And people didn't even know that. Simple as Carbon Square, Upham's Corner, Clary Square, and even that Carson Beach that we could not have even go to because we would have got beaten up on. And even as simple as I went to Dorchester High, and as simple as that school that was right there in Carbon Square, where there's an apartment building there right now, we usually have to catch the bus to go back to Roxbury, and they would stone us and they would say all kinds of things about it. But the kids today, as far as the school system is, I feel as though, yes, they have come a long way, but yet still, because I remember I couldn't take home a C to my father. Today now a C's a passing grade. So I think right now they kind of more or less cheat the kids because a C was a failing grade back in them days. Now a C is a passing grade. The educational system is more beneficial to the big colleges and now, like the Harvards and the MITs and the Northeast universities and all these other things. Yeah, we have come a long way with that. But as far as the curriculums for the younger kids and stuff, I still feel though that the kids are being cheated because when you can tell a kid that you get a C and that's a passing grade, when back in the day a C was a failing grade, I think we're still doing the kids an injustice to the younger grades.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And long time listener, first time caller, I love and appreciate you. I hope you have an awesome day today. We have another call on the line. Good Rising Caller, you're live.
Good rising.
Hey, Miss G.
I wanted to ask Jim Boyd, did he question the stories that he did? And did he do research on them to make sure that the information that he was given was accurate? And also, I want to give shouts out to Mel King because I marched on that beach with Mel King.
Yes.
And yes, the white people did throw stuff at us, but we threw it back.
Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, I was in the middle, and hopefully, well, I would hope that you weren't among those that were throwing things because, again, in my opinion, that's not going to accomplished anything. But at any rate, I just hope that the rock that I thought had my name on it didn't come from you.
We have another caller on the line. Let's get to that question. Did you, because we do talk about some of the times where reporters just report and they don't go back and confirm the truth. I go back to the milk incident that took place, I believe, in Michigan, where the reporters were doing this investigative report and they reported that milk had all of these and the lawyers sued not to have that story covered, and that the media presents what it wants to present, and whether or not some of the stories you presented you knew were not factual, but you just had to report it because it was your job.
I don't recall ever a situation where something that I reported was something that I knew was not factual, and deliberately reported something that was a falsehood. The question of whether or not each and every fact and each and every story that I ever read from the anchor desk had been as thoroughly researched as I would have liked. I have to be honest about that and say, there are retractions. And I think that in my career, I've done my fair share of retracting a story or correcting a story because the information initially that was reported was incorrect. I just don't think that there's ever been any intent to put something on the air that I or my station knew was a falsehood, a lie, or deceptive. That isn't the way that I work personally. And I wouldn't work for an organization that intentionally said, okay, we know that this is the truth over here on the right, but we want you to go to the left and just sort of bend the truth a little bit because of whatever reasons. It just didn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
Jim Boy said, not at my house. 617-282-0062. We're coming to the top of the hour, you guys. So if you have any questions, hit me up on Facebook, TaylaAndre, and I'll make sure I get those questions answered for you on the YouTube. Shout out to those that are currently watching. Shout out to those that are out of state. I have a gentleman who's listening from New York who said, I don't know who Jim Boyd is, but he sounds like an amazing man, and you guys are lucky to have had him as a news anchor.
That is very flattering, and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. We have another call on the line. Good rising, caller, you live.
Good rising.
Good rising.
Me and my mother was literally talking about this 2 days ago. We were just reminiscing. We were like, where are all the black reporters on the news stations? We're watching these news stations at 5, 4, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and there's no black people on TV reporting news. And the only two names that my mother came up and that we came up was Jim Boyd and Liz Walker. Those are the only two people that we had for anchor people for the news. And we're supposed to be getting better. Boston's supposed to reflect diversity, but it's getting worse when you see the news being reported, and it's not people that's reflective of the city. No Hispanics, no blacks, nobody.
Well, you and your mother are thinking outside of the box. Jim, anything you want to say about that?
Well, I have a television set in my home, and I watch television, and I see the same images that the caller sees. And things are seemingly have regressed to some extent. There are some names that were missed. Not only was it myself and Liz Walker, but there was Maurice Lewis and Lester Strong and Jackie Adams. I mean, there were a number of other people of color that did appear. But as my thoughts on you, Byron Barnett is still on the air, but in terms of main anchor roles, I have to agree with the caller. We basically have just sort of like faded into the background. We are consumers. We are consumers of basically not only the things that we buy in the grocery store and the department stores, but we are consumers of products such as a television newscast. And if we don't like what we see on television, we can change the channel or turn the televisions off, or make our voices heard in other ways, such as talking to the sponsors. And you talk to the sponsors in the same way. If a sponsor is basically helping to promote a product that you don't agree with, then you stop patronizing that particular sponsor. But it's one thing to call a radio station and say, we don't like what we see on television. You can do the same thing by picking up the phone, or these days with the new technology, sending an email, or going
Send them a
on,
tweet.
going, right, going on Twitter or Facebook, and expressing your lack of appreciation for what you see on television. I mean, people that are providing television programming, have a license to serve the public. And I always considered that, as a newscaster reporter, I was a servant of the public. I was there as the eyes and ears of the people that couldn't be at certain events that I was covering, or know the things that came across my desk, as an anchor that I was reading as part of the news. So the bottom line, I think, is what you need to do as audience members. If you don't like what you see on television, let people know. You're going to get changes if you let people know that you're not satisfied with what you see. You're going to get the status quo if you just complain about it or don't complain about it.
Absolutely. We have one more caller on the line, and then all of the questions will be taken off air on YouTube, TaylaAndre. If you miss any of today or any other 442 shows, I believe we're at, they are uploaded on mixcloud.com. Again, TaylaAndre. Good rising, caller, you're live.
Good rising, is it me?
It's you. Shut your radio off for me, darling.
No. Yes, I just want to say thank you to Jim for being a trailblazer, because that year I had just gotten here from Jamaica, and you were the only black face that I was seeing on television here. I turned on, and all the talking heads were white, but I was busting down to Beacon Hill to go to school down there on George Street at the Peter Samuel School. I think it's a partner building or something now. And I remember, me and my brothers, we couldn't walk beyond Codman Square without getting chased. And I was a fast runner, and there was always one of the chasers that would be faster than the rest of the pack. And I would turn a corner, he'd be on my heels, I had to stop, beat him down, and leave him laying there and run on about my business. By the time the boys would catch up, they'd find him horizontal.
Between you and Miss G, we're going to have the police all over here.
And the statute of limitations is gone. But that was self-defense. And I was being chased. Every organism is programmed for survival. We're the only ones who lay down and let folks take us out for free.
Lord have mercy. Talqua, I love and appreciate you. I hope you have an awesome day today. Really quickly, how do Uncle Terry sent me a message. My Uncle Terry is my real uncle, and he said that I remember tuning in to Channel 5, seeing him on air, not realizing the significance at that time. It was a great feeling in my youth to see a man of color on TV, especially doing the news. He's iconic. He's an iconic figure. I still watch Channel 5 to this day. On a side note, I always would say how much he and Jim Rice resemble one another.
Yes, we did.
Thank you so much.
That's phenomenal. And I certainly appreciate those comments from your uncle.
Thank you. Again, I want to go back. Uncle Terry, how old were you? Like 14, 16 when I was born? I remember sitting in Randolph in front of my grandmother's oven, getting my hair pressed and curled, and hearing your voice and seeing your face. And as an adult woman, like my uncle said, I didn't realize how significant that image was. And for all those that are listening, that are angry and upset and, discouraged because you don't see those faces anymore, you need to pick up the phone and don't call 617-282-0062. But go ahead and send a tweet and let them know. I watch the news on a daily basis, and I want to see news. I want to see newscasters that represent my community, that represent Boston. Don't just complain about it, be about it. Jim Boyd, I want to thank you for your time. I still want to tell you I'm very nervous because I'm like, what is he going to tell me? I messed up. Malapropisms. Thank you.
Oh, it's absolutely been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. Bringing back some of those memories of some of the situations that I covered. As unpleasant as it was then, and as unpleasant as it is now to have to bring that into recall. I think what's important is that we understand just who we are, what we've gone through, and just how much further we have to go. But Tayla, thanks so much. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk to you and to talk to Boston.
Hey, listen, Jim, if ever you want to relive your previous years, you can do it right here. Let me know if you want to come and sit in on a few shows. I would love some direction in my life.
It's so funny, as I was getting up and driving through it in the dark to get here, I thought, well, actually, I can't complain about the early hour because I used to get up at 2:30 in the morning.
Are you serious?
The eye opener went on the air at 5 o'clock, and so I had to be there by 4. So, you got to get up.
I will not complain.
And make sure that the face that you're putting on television is something that somebody wants to look at. So, got to deal with the hair and shaving,
makeup,
and all
everything.
That kind of stuff.
Well, hallelujah, ashe, ashe. Good thing this is radio.
I love it. I mean, now I have a face for radio, whereas at one point I may have had a face for television, but, I don't have to worry about shaving anymore. I mean, I have a beard, and it's just great to be able to relax. The one nice thing about being retired is I do get to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And there's so many things that I had to put on the back burner while I was still gainfully employed that I can now just take care of and relax and do, and get an opportunity like this where I can talk as opposed to Jim, we want you to do that story in 1:30, no more. I mean, so it's given me an opportunity to just sort of express myself, and I've been long-winded at times, but I deeply appreciate the opportunity to sort of go back into my own memory bank and into my archives of stories that I covered and things that I witnessed, and be able to talk about them and share it all with you and with your audience. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And we appreciate you. We love you. For other educators that are out there who would like to bring you back into the school system, do you still do that?
I do.
You do?
I do.
And how can they reach you?
Well, I have a Facebook page. So they can reach me on Facebook.
Jim Boyd.
I have a Twitter page, as well. And I'm not going to give up my email address.
That's fine. Just hit him up on Facebook. Hit him up on Twitter. Jim Boyd. Your Twitter name isn't exactly Jim Boyd. There's some letters and numbers, and I'll go ahead and post that on the Facebook page, Waking Up with Tayla Andre, TaylaAndre, for those that are interested. Again, Jim, love and appreciate you. Thank you. We hope you have an awesome day. Big City 101.3 FM, Waking Up with Tayla Andre, Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 7. I thank you for dealing with me. I know I sound raspy. I know I sound disgusting. I apologize to the YouTube watchers that the way that I look is the way that I look, but I thank you all. Mwah.
Yep, that's right, baby. You know what it is? It's DJ Sus One, the feature presentation. Listen, make sure you wake up with Tayla Andre Monday through Friday, 5 to 7 a.m. on Big City 101.3 FM. Wake up with the Radio Rebel. Politics, news, conspiracies. Wake up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. This is the type of stuff I'm into, all right? Make sure you tune in. Let's go.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. Sorry, it must have been me. I mean, was I supposed to lie?
No. Sorry.
Today I'm feeling nice. I say today I'm feeling.
Jim, we can They mean in the other room.
Father, bless me. Nothing can stress me. I was born with so much love. Thank you, mommy. I stay so humble and giving. People don't know how I'm living, but I have got no worries, cause everything will be already. I handle everybody. Now it's
Hey, what's your nationality?
My nationality is, as opposed to being African American with a little bit of Native American.
Ah.
I'm
gonna go turn this light on. Come have a seat.
So, yeah, my grandfather on my mother's side, at least according to my brother, was half Cherokee.
So you qualify for the scholarships.
I don't know that I do.
You said according to my brother. Have you ever done the test?
No.
Would you be interested in doing that?
It's just my youngest daughter has asked me to do that.
Do it.
You know, to do like the DNA test and figure out, exactly.
And what's his name? He's at Harvard. He on PBS. He does the show Finding Your Roots.
Gates?
Is it Henry Gates?
Henry Louis Gates?
Gates, yeah.
Are we on?
Yeah, we are. Yeah. Okay, so I just forgot all of the questions on my phone. Give me 5 seconds. Or if you want to just tell them anything about you that we haven't covered yet.
Oh, so this is something that's new and different for me. So I guess we're on the internet and we're on the internet live. Can this be seen?
YouTube. This will be posted on YouTube, which will be posted on my page, Wake Up with Tayla Andre.
Is that a YouTube page? Or is that your
That's the Facebook.
Okay.
And yeah, if you have any more questions for those that are tuned in, I want to give a huge shout out to Tony Hines, who made this possible.
Yes.
A to Z TV, bringing you interesting people, places, and things and events from A to Z. Thank you so much, Tony Hines, for this time. And some of the questions that we got that we weren't able to get to on air was, other than the school system and the busing incident that we spoke of, were there any other landmark events or milestones during your career as an anchor that you were able to cover that you'd like to share with us?
We're talking about just a vast array of things that I covered. A a lot of times people will ask me, what's the most memorable interview you ever had, or the most, probably, I guess I have to stick with the word memorable, experience that I've had as a reporter. It was doing an interview with Bill Clinton. And it was instrumental in, and very, very different, because I don't think I'd ever been in the presence of somebody who had so much presence. This was after Bill Clinton was president. He was in Boston to pay respects to the late Joe Moakley, Boston state representative, Boston congressman who had passed away. The Moakley Courthouse is named after him. And I got an opportunity to talk to Bill Clinton. It was very impromptu. It wasn't an organized, set up interview. He was there to pay his respects, and I was there to cover basically whatever happened at that particular spot at the State House. And he had gone in and paid his respects. And I got an opportunity just to talk with him for probably as much as 4 or 5 minutes. And if you needed something to tell you just how powerful and how much presence an individual can have, you've probably been in situations where someone would walk in a room and then all of a sudden would consume the room because they just had so much stature. And Bill Clinton was that kind of person. And as I was talking to him, it was direct eye contact, as though within seconds, I felt like I was talking to an old friend. I had been in a situation where I'd watched him do interviews with 3 or 4 other reporters. And we were there to talk about this. I was there to talk about the same things that they had just talked about. And when I asked him questions, obviously I couldn't ask him anything vastly different. I mean, he'd been in to pay his respects to Joe Moakley's family. What did he say to him? What was his feeling? What did he think about Joe Moakley? What's interesting about that is, again, I talked about the eye contact that we had. And as though there were only 2 people in the world at that point, Bill Clinton and me. And when I asked him the same kind of questions, he gave me totally different answers, but said the same thing. So it just suggested to me that he was paying attention to me and being mindful of the fact that he didn't want to sound like a robot. And it was just an incredible experience. It was an incredible experience. There are so many other things that have happened during my career, that I feel very privileged to have been able to cover. A lot of them small things involving small people, as opposed to big stories, like covering the, say the explosion of the Challenger. I was in the newsroom when that happened, or I was working when 9/11 happened. I mean, those are huge stories that if you're involved in any way, shape, or form, you never forget. But some of the things that I was much more directly involved with, very small stories, that had an impact on me, that felt this is what the media can do, and how it can, what it can do best, and how it can do it. There was a situation where people were protesting, like it was a handful of people, not more than 20, were protesting at the office, the Boston office of what they considered to be a slumlord who had properties in Chelsea. And they were complaining about the fact that this person was mistreating the people that lived in his properties. The man got on the phone and he called the local police, the Boston police, and this is several years ago, called the local police and said, I have these protesters out, on my property, out in front of my office, making a lot of noise. Come and get rid of them for me. So the protesters told me as a reporter, says, this guy, there are warrants out for his arrest, based on the fact that he has not.
And he called the police.
He hasn't kept his property up, but he's a Chelsea slumlord, and the warrants are out for him in Chelsea. So I went back to the police station and just come and shoot all of these people away and said, and I think it was District 14 in Brighton, I could be wrong about that. But I walked in and said, my understanding is that there are warrants out for this man's arrest in Chelsea. And he calls you and you come over and tell people that are peacefully protesting out in front of his property that they have to leave. I said, are you aware that there are warrants in Chelsea? So the police did some research and found that there were warrants and went back and hauled the guy away. I mean, just brought him out of there. And the individuals themselves, made absolutely no impact on the police when they said, arrest this man, arrest this man. But as a member of the media, I went in and I said, okay, this is what I understand. I haven't researched it. I don't know that it's true, but if you have a way of checking to see whether or not there are warrants out for this man's arrest and whether or not you can act on those warrants.
Were those same day results or?
And there were actually same day results because I went back and was there when they, bringing the man, out in handcuffs and doing whatever they did to bring him in and, get him, at least to have justice served. And one of the, again, very small story that I recall was an individual who was probably in his late 70s who had befriended a woman who was supposed to be a former schoolmate of his son. And she was homeless, and she and her daughter came and lived with the man for about 3 or 4 months. Bottom line is that his sight was impaired, and it was so much easier for her to get his, code numbers, through his bank account and go in and conduct business for him. And then, she finally leaves, and she found out that he was like $11,000 in arrears because she had, wiped out all of his accounts. So what was interesting in that regard was that I did that story, ran it on the air, and by the time the story aired, shortly after the story aired, this man was made whole again. By the good nature of people that are watching television. I mean, it just, again, it shows the power that you have.
That was
in the media.
GoFundMe, all these funding sites.
Yeah, I retired from Channel 5 in 2008. So this sort of situation did not exist. I mean, yes, we had social media. Yes, we had the internet, but it wasn't anything like it is now. This was just people picking up the phone and saying, gee, we feel so badly for the man. Here's $10, here's $15. And I must admit that the photographer that I was with, put a couple of bucks on the table before he left the house, and sort of I felt, well, I can't let him do that. I mean, so I did the same thing. But that's immaterial. What is just the power of the media. And it also speaks to the goodness in the hearts of people. Not the goodness in the heart of the woman that ripped this guy off, but the goodness in the hearts of people who sit and watch television as well. This man is less fortunate than I am, and he's had this tragic situation happen to him. When we were sitting in his home, and the kitchen table was stacked with bills. Your gas bill hasn't been paid, your electricity bill hasn't been paid, your cable bill hasn't been paid, And he's trying to figure out why all of this had happened. And this is a story that we picked up out of a local newspaper, and decided that we were going to act on it as well. That it's an opportunity for you to use the power that's entrusted to not you as an individual, but the institution that you work for. And then I had another situation like that, a woman who lived in some section of Boston, perhaps it was Mattapan or Dorchester, and lost a son to gun violence. And that was in, I think, in the late 1970s or maybe early 1980s. And she decided to move to one of the suburbs. And she ran into one difficult situation after another. But she moved because she had another son. And she said, I'm not going to lose another kid, to violence. We're just going to take off. She had some issues with not being able to pay her rent. She lost her job. And she was being evicted. So I went and met her outside the court where she'd gotten the final decree that said she had to be out of our house. I mean, I thought it was a telling story that here a woman who through no fault of her own, has run into this difficulty and that difficulty and lost a job and whatnot, still trying to do the right thing by her family, her surviving son. So I put that story on the air. And that night, an individual called and said, I want to help. I'll pay her back rent for 6 months.
Wow.
And give her enough money that she can, be whole for the next couple of months.
That's huge.
And then there were, so what you do in a situation like that is you can't obviously take at face value exactly what the woman said. So you go and you check out the story. And, so I talked with banks and I talked with, the landlord of the property that the woman lived in. And clearly, there were issues. But for me, the bottom line was the fact that you can have this kind of impact by doing a small story, involving one or two people, and get some results. It's sort of, the thing that you do if you are doing like a local newspaper and you go and you tell a story. And so people who read your local newspaper in a town of 15,000, 18,000 may understand it. But when you have the power of the media of something as humongous, if you will, as Channel 5, Boston TV station, you can get some good results, and you can feel that your power is enhanced by what's in your heart, what you're trying to accomplish, what your values are, and what you feel is important. And I think you probably get the impression that what's important in my life, in my heart, is other people and the welfare of other people and what happens with other folks.
So this question is a personal question, kind of piggybacks off the question that I asked on air, but we're seeing now more than ever media guiding people towards what they should believe and steering the truth, bending it a little bit. How can those who may not be internet savvy or may not know, where to get the truth from, how can they watch the news but yet still be critical thinkers about what they're actually hearing?
I think that you can watch the news and be critical thinkers about what is by sampling a number of sources. We have a tendency to want to listen to people that think like we do. And that's all well and good, assuming that the things that you're listening to are to some degree factual, and are non-injurious to either yourself or others. And that's probably not direct enough. But I think what you need to do is you need to sample, the devil is better than the devil you don't know. And so you need to not only listen to those voices that are speaking what you believe, but also to the voices that are perhaps raising some questions about what it is that you're hearing. The media can be extremely persuasive.
They spend billions of dollars.
But it's supposed to be objective. Let's put all media aside for a second and zero in on, say, television news. Television news is supposed to be objective. But television news is a product. Television news basically it has a bottom line. So it provides a service, it provides information, but it doesn't provide all of the information you can't possibly, as you know, doing a lot of internet research, you can put a particular topic, up on a line in a search engine, and you'll come back with so much information you'll be reading for the next 5 years, before you get. So, to get back to answering your question, I mean, one of the things that you can do is just read as much as you can read, whether it's reading newspapers or reading on the internet, or listening to various opinions as they come across on the radio and watching one news source, that perhaps has one slant or one particular political persuasion is only going to get you listening to the voices that you consistently hear, and the voices that probably echo your own sentiments. You're not going to learn very much from that. It sort of would allow me to bring in one of my favorite phrases. Is my father used to tell me, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. That means you should be listening twice as much as you talk. And in this regard, you should be listening to as many different sources as you can possibly listen to, as opposed to just speaking out of your mouth with that one particular point of view. Television, in a broad scope, is an entertainment medium, and it's there to basically entertain you. I see entertainment as a way of basically helping us to avoid the hard topics, the difficult things in life. And you sit and you laugh at something for half an hour, and you go away kind of feeling better. And in the meantime, in that half an hour, all of the difficulties in your life, have been put on a back burner. But there are things that are put on television that are just there to help persuade you to think in a particular way. Television ads, for example, are there to say, we are the best product out there for you, so why don't you go on out and spend your hard-earned money on it? We are the best credit card out there for you, so why don't you use our credit card? Oh, they don't tell you have to pay it back? That's never part of any commercials, that you're assuming some debt, and that debt is being added on to by 16, 19% interest. No, they don't tell you that, but they tell you that if you have this particular card in your pocket,
what's in your wallet,
right? And but I think that's what the media is all about. I mean, it sends you a message, and the message is, don't think about the serious things in your life. But that's what we all have to think about. Those are the things that we have to be accountable to and accountable for. So in my opinion, yes, the media is there to give a message. The media is there to try to influence people, but you have to understand that you can't get very far, and you're not going to be very well educated if what you do is listen to the voices that are telling you what you already believe. Listen to voices that tell you what you don't believe. If we want to talk about this particular election cycle that's going on now, I have never been so excited about an election. And the reason I'm excited about this election is because I think it is so incredibly meaningful, because we have choices that for who's going to govern the United States of America, at least for the next 4 years after President Obama leaves office. That could be tremendous in terms of how it impacts, the culture that we live in. And on the one hand, we have a Donald Trump, and on the other hand, I guess, is Bernie Sanders, and many, many, many people in between. And I have no understanding of how it is that Donald Trump has gotten
this
as far as he has gotten. I have I can't say I have no understanding, because I've been listening very carefully and watching an awful lot. There is an anger out there with what's going on in this country. And Donald Trump has tapped into that, and so has Bernie Sanders. But I tend to think that somewhere in the middle, between those two opposite poles, is where we need to be in terms of who should govern this country from here on.
Can I ask you who you think will win?
I really have no clue. I have no clue who I think will win. And I guess that comes from the fact that, I'm not invested in this. And the reason I say I'm not invested in this is because I don't see somebody who says, Jim, vote for me, vote for me, vote for me. I mean, I just think it's going to be, by the time it's all said and done, the lesser of the evils. It's going to be the lesser of the evils. And, who I vote for, I can pretty much assure you it's not going to be Donald Trump. And the reason for that is I just don't think that he is serious. I think he's still entertaining. For me, what I thought was very telling, and as I said, I've watched an awful lot of this. I watched him in a debate where he said to Jeb Bush, "Your brother lied. He lied about weapons of mass destruction. And I'm not sure he said he's a liar, but he did say he lied.
Mm-hmm.
The George W. Bush administration lied about weapons of mass destruction. Now, whether you believe that or not is another issue. A lot of people believe that, yes, there were no weapons of mass destruction. And Bush sent Colin Powell down to the UN, and he sat there and he basically had to toe the party line and tell them that, so they basically went to war against Saddam Hussein. But I believe it was a town meeting that was held on CNN in South Carolina, a man got up and said, Mr. Trump, I'm with you. I'm very much in favor of what it is that you do, but I also am somebody who's with George W. Bush, a man who I respect greatly. And the other day, while you were in a debate, you said that he lied. Now, do you really mean to tell me you thought the President of the United States lied? You thought that George W. Bush lied and was a liar? And Donald Trump wouldn't answer the question. He said, well, I have to go see the tape to see whether or not I said that he lied. And again, this is a conversation that went on between the questioner in the audience and Donald Trump. And I may be leaving a couple of things out. But I thought, well, he has such a presence and such bravado, that he claims that this person is this thing. But I sat there and I watched both of those things with my own eyes and listened with my own ears. And I thought, why is it that he won't answer this man's question and say, yeah, well, when I was in the debate, I said yes, that he lied about what.
Hold on one moment. Neil?
Who's calling me?
I am. I'd like to introduce you to Jim Boyd. Jim Boyd, this is Il Neil.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No.
What time? Well, let me know because I got an appointment.
So that just sort of simply said, oh, wait a minute. Does that go to his character that he'll make a statement at one point and then not back it up and not admit to the fact that he made that statement? What's he going to do if he holds the highest office in the world? The highest office in the land. If he's the president, and will he say one thing in one forum and then say something else in another forum? What does he mean?
Let me go back and review the tapes. That's crazy.
Well, he said, well, I have to look at the tapes. Well, there wasn't any question in my mind that he said he lied. He said those words, that he lied. He was talking about George W. Bush. He was talking about the issue.
And it was all in the headlines.
Talking about weapons of mass destruction. And I'm just curious as to why it didn't get more play. But, this election season is young yet. And
so my battery's about to die. So we are going to take two more questions. And thank you so much for dealing with me. My nose is so horrible.
Good luck with that infection. I hope there's lots of antibiotics in your future.
They're my system, not my future. What kind of music do you listen to? He was in here jamming earlier to some soca though.
I like music, and my preference is to listen to like old rhythm and blues, rock and roll, old Motown sounds. I mean, Marvin Gaye, Temptations, Diana Ross.
Real music.
Well, I mean, it's music that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
But truth be told, I don't listen to music generally on the radio. I listen to all news or all talk most of the time. Get in the right sports season, I listen to a lot of sports talk radio. But not very much music. I mean, I use music, when I want to be put in a mood, or particularly, sometimes I'll get up like on a Saturday morning and just fill the house with music and drive everybody else either out or crazy. But or when I'm working out, put on headphones and play music that gets my body moving faster, so that I can burn those calories. But so music, it's interesting because I have a musical background. Not me personally, but I have a musical background. My grandfather was a violinist that played classical violin, and he performed in Carnegie Hall in New York City.
Really?
I believe it was November 25th, 1925, which I was reminded of. That I went back to school. I started at UMass, and I took one semester at UMass, took a course in African American musicians, or African American musicians. And so my advisor said, here's what you're going to find. You're going to find that the first day of classes, everybody rushes to the bookstore to get their books. And you'll be in a line that you may not even get in for an hour and a half. I would suggest that sometime prior to the first day of classes, or first week of classes, you look and see what your textbooks are. So I looked at the textbooks, went in a week before and bought the textbooks, and believe it or not, I took them home and read them, or at least read through them. And on page 287 of one of the books, there was a picture of my grandfather in the textbook that we were using for this African and African American musicians course over at UMass. And now my dad, both my parents passed away, but my dad had a photograph. And it was a similar photograph to the one that was in the book. And there's my grandfather, in print.
Did you not know this prior to taking this class?
I had no idea where that photograph was from. I had no idea about the Carnegie Hall performance. And at the suggestion of a brother-in-law, I made contact with the archivist at Carnegie Hall, and he sent me a copy of the program from that night with my grandfather's name in it, and a copy of a review that appeared in the New York Times.
Do you have that to this day?
I do. As a matter of fact, I have it all in a frame in my home. And I have the violin that my grandfather played in 1925.
Hold on, what?
It was
How did you get the violin?
Well, my dad had it. And I was, when my dad passed away in 1996, my mom passed away in 1998, and when I was cleaning out the apartment in New York City, and my sister said to me, well, what are we going to do with this violin? I said, what violin? It was like up in the upper reaches of a closet. And I pulled it down and looked at it and I said, oh, this is pretty interesting. What is this? And so I brought it home. And then one day I said, well, let's see what I can find out about this. And so I took it over to this violin shop, hoping that I was going to get it restored. And I was told, well, in order to put it in playing shape, it's going to cost. And I thought, well, I'm never going to play it because I don't know what to do with it. I don't even know how to hold a violin. But then, so we looked at it, and he said, oh, well, this is a violin that was made in Germany, and you could see through like the little treble holes in the side of the violin, that it was the label of where it was made and how it was made and when it was made was still visible. made somewhere in Germany in 1867, if I'm not mistaken.
What?
So, and my dad sang in the church choir. He had a quartet that sang hymns and spirituals, and they recorded some things. And I think I have some of those recordings in my house somewhere in a box someplace. But that's my musical background. It kind of like skipped over me and skipped over my kids. And my younger brother had some musical talent. He performed at some concerts, I think up until he got into high school, and then he abandoned it, as my older brother and I did. And we took all three of my daughters and tried to have them learn how to play piano, and it just never worked with any of them either. But somewhere, hopefully, that musical talent will sort of rear its ugly head out of somebody in the future generation.
Do you have grandkids?
I have one grandson.
So maybe it'll come out of him.
Could be. He's got so much on his plate, so many different things that are, I'm hoping that at some point we're gonna get some more grandchildren, because just so much pressure is on this kid. Through divorces, etc., and separations. My grandson has 7 grandparents.
What? What's like 2 divorces and a single parent?
Yeah. Well, I divorced and remarried. So he has 2 grandparents in my house.
So this is a daughter from your ex?
Yes.
Okay.
So my ex-wife is remarried, so the 2 other grandparents. My son-in-law's dad has remarried, so the 2 other grandparents, so that makes 6. And my son-in-law's mother has not remarried, so there's 7. So
7 grandparents.
So talk about a kid that's spoiled. and everybody says, well, he's going to be this, he's going to be that. My family is quite athletic. My daughters both were high school athletes, and one of my daughters was a college athlete. Actually, 2 of my daughters were college athletes. So, my oldest daughter, the one who's the mother of my grandson, she was a rower at Yale.
Oh, wow.
My youngest daughter played field hockey at Cornell. And my middle daughter is the one,
she's the middle child.
She's the one I was going to evaluate my kids. I don't, they're liable to see this and say, Dad, how could you say that? But she's the one who, the 2 younger ones were 3 sport athletes in high school. And the middle daughter played volleyball. She was second team All-State in volleyball. She played basketball, and she was offered a scholarship to play volleyball, and decided she didn't want to go to the school that was offering the scholarship, and went someplace that didn't offer a scholarship. Played club volleyball and have a blast doing that. But my daughters are all pretty tall. The mother of my grandson is 6 foot.
Oh, wow.
Alyssa, my middle daughter, is 5'11", she says. I think she's 6 foot as well. And Olivia, the youngest, says that she's the runt of the family at 5'9". So.
Oh, wow.
But I'm blessed. I have 3 phenomenal daughters, and couldn't be more proud of them.
And a grandson.
More pleased. And my grandson's about 4 years old. So. And he's 4 years old. His dad's about 6'3", and his mom is, like I said, 6 feet. So he looks like he's going to be 6'6" or 6'7" or something like that. So my daughter told me the last time they were with him at a doctor. But he's a cool kid. So whether or not he's a musician, I don't know. But he is typical little boy. I mean, he's just a rubber band. Can't keep still, running around.
All of them are.
Grandpa, will you play with me? You wore me out like 15 minutes ago.
It's time for a nap.
But it's cool.
So is it true that you are a stand-in for Morgan Freeman?
Ooh, absolutely. That's just phenomenal. That was just a phenomenal experience. Sort of it goes to the, one of the things that I do, as I mentioned, we were on the air, that I get to do what I want to do when I want to do it, is doing some background acting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been a real delight.
The Equalizer.
I've done a lot of things. I was actually on screen in Spotlight.
Okay.
I was on
TED
screen.
2, right?
TED 2 is when I did the stand-in work for Morgan Freeman. So as a stand-in, obviously you're not going to be on screen. But it was just, I mean, how can you be in the presence of such greatness and such an icon as Morgan Freeman? And you have probably some acting background yourself, so you know what a stand-in does. So we sort of like exchanged greetings when he came in, and I was probably like everybody else who was in the vicinity, just sort of like staring. I don't believe that I'm standing here.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that I'm playing the Morgan Freeman character to help set things up for him. But and I was 3 days to stand in for Morgan Freeman.
High five.
So
the computer has told us that we are completely out of time. Thank you so much, Jim Boyd. Please, one more time, let us know your Twitter, your Facebook. How can we reach you?
what do I have?
It's Jim Boyd.
Oh,
Some